Welcome to Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast with me, Jane.
And me, Sophie. So welcome to this episode. It's the second week in February when we are recording this, and according to various studies, a significant majority of people, around 80%, tend to give up their New Year's resolutions by this week, meaning that most people abandon their resolutions within a fairly short time frame after making them, and only a small percentage manage to stick to them throughout the entire year. Firstly, I just want to say that somebody told me the other day that New Year's Day in Great Britain changed from the 25th of March to January 1st in 1752 because of this Calendar Act of 1750. So no wonder every year we are struggling to start up new hobbies and interests in the middle of winter. It's freezing, it's cold, and the grey skies feel oppressive. It does make me wonder what the percentages would be if we all started in spring. However, today we wanted to begin at the beginning of what we really, irrespective of the season, look at in yoga therapy when we start working with people, and that is, of course, habit and change. If yoga is all about reducing suffering and making our lives that little bit better, how do we change habits, and why are habits so damn persistent in the first place? We know as yoga therapists, we know that this is not just about willpower. It's about the wiring of our nervous systems, our thoughts, our life journeys that have shaped our sense of identity over time. It's about our unique environments, our living, working, and any health conditions that we live with. So Jane, when we work with habit change in yoga therapy, sometimes we could start by looking at the way that the mind operates and how the body reacts. Where do you typically start when you think about habit and change?
I think, I'd probably start by telling people to begin in March. It's always been my thing. That's when the year starts. I would say that the most important thing that we really need to consider is that everything is built on patterns. Like everything that we do is based on these patterns, and some of the patterns are really old and some of them relatively new. And when someone comes to you with a chronic health concern, or just it can be just generally feeling out of sorts, then the first place to look is to start to unpick some of those, just in your as a therapist, in your own mind. Okay, what are the cycles we could begin to change, and then to come at it in quite a general way with people before you start suggesting changes that might be a little bit challenging. And obviously, the definition of svasta, which is our system, is this idea of bringing people back to balance. So svasta is a state of being established in the self, in good health, physically and mentally and spiritually. And it's really a case of when you're first working with someone, you're kind of just seeing how far away they are from that change, or from that potential change that's going to make them feel better. And then thinking realistically about what you can do. So I don't know. I mean, shall we discuss the sort of the traditional framework and link it into the scientific framework that we know in sort of neurobiology and
absolutely. So I think that one of the things that yoga therapy taught me was this idea of the vritti samskara cycle, and I'd never come across this. So could you perhaps just explain what is that? What's the meaning behind this vritti samskara cycle?
Yeah, so a vritti, they're just a word that, that has a very specific meaning in Sanskrit, but it doesn't tend to just be one word. So a vritti is an action or a mental behaviour or a physical behaviour, and it's something that we do. And when we do it, it has an impact. It has, so every action has obviously a result. And when we do something over and over, like, for example, I don't know, drinking tea or coffee or whatever, we expect a certain result, and then then there is this latent impression that gets laid down, and that's the samskara part. And that is like the neural pathway. The vritti, or the action, is something which is conscious, usually. That is like, I do something, and although I don't often realise I'm doing it, it's a conscious act initially. But then when this samskara gets deeper and deeper, when this neural pathway becomes really established, like a groove, we just do it, then it becomes unconscious. And obviously that's your neural pathway, isn't it? That's this idea that it becomes something that we just do, which is important for survival.
Yeah, like the scientific phrase is neurons that fire together, wire together.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously those vritti samskara cycles, we have a lot of ones which are really helpful. So, for example, when I learn to read, I start by looking at the letters, and I recognise a letter and I go, oh, that sounds like this. When in English that's a bit hard because it sounds like loads of things. But, I have this letter, and then I put it together with some other letters, and then it makes a word, and then the words make a sentence. But I don't have to, every time that I want to read, I don't have to go back and go, unless I have a learning issue that means that is difficult for me. But generally speaking, I will go and I will automatically be able to read. Because if I had to learn to do that again and again, then I wouldn't be able to function. And so having that is a really helpful survival thing, and it saves a lot of time. It's very economical, isn't it, for the nervous system to just be able to do that. But obviously, for every cycle that is useful and positive and supportive to my health, there's also cycles of behaviour that we get into which are not helpful. So at the extreme end of that is addiction. And that is where we pick something up, don't even know we've done it, and before a second has gone, we've eaten it, drank it, ingested it, whatever. And just in the same way that this cycle gives us saves time, and it's just like we do it and we just do it without thinking, so the unhelpful habits are ingrained in the same way. So it's the same idea, if you like, behind all of that. How do we make a change? So if we've got those really ingrained habits, it's like, how are we going to make a change? Can we just stop them? No, we can't. And obviously, one of the things that working with this and that we've, understand is that there are some things that we will do where we can take small steps, small little steps, and that will work. And in some instances, we'll have to take a big step because it's the only way to make a change for certain things. So, for example, stopping smoking. It's quite unlikely that you'll just cut down your number of fags and then not smoke any. It generally tends to be all or nothing in those kind of sort of addictions. And where am I going with this? So one of the things that we look at, which is really powerful, is, well, if we've got these systems and these cycles, and that they're so powerful, why don't we use them and make something that is going to be positive stronger? And so rather than trying to suppress something which is old and which we're kind of stuck in or we're ingrained in, we can begin to bring in particularly mental behaviours, but also things that we do in our lives. We can start to bring in a cycle which is going to lead us towards a more pleasant state, rather than cycles that lead us towards suffering, that lead us towards feeling crap about ourselves. And so what we do is we bring in these practices in small little steps, and we try to then get those cycles to get stronger and stronger, so that the ones that have been causing us to suffer become less strong. And again, we can talk about this when we do the next instalment. What are the kinds of things we can do to help us with either of those situations? Do you think that's clear?
Yeah, definitely. And the way that I always think about this vritti samskara cycle, just I suppose in the most simplistic terms possible, is that our emotions affect our thoughts, and our thoughts therefore affect our behaviours. Yeah. And that is that simple explanation of we just roll in these patterns of, for example, if you are the person who feels really anxious in social settings, you might think, well, I'm no good at socialising. I don't feel comfortable there. And then the thought is, well, I'm not going to go to the party, or I'm better off alone than I am in any scenario where I have to deal with other people. And that kind of reinforces that emotion of not feeling like good enough in that setting. And then the behaviour becomes that you avoid socialising. Yeah. And then you can get stuck in a cycle. And to be honest, it's really, maybe I'm speaking about myself, like I identify as an introvert, and sometimes I could go through a little cycle of, well, actually I'm very peaceful and content on my own. Then when you go to the thing and you know, then you have a great time. Like you have an amazing time interacting with positive, friendly people. And then it makes you realise, oh God, I wasn't going to go if I'd have stuck with that emotion of, you know, I feel really comfortable at home kind of thing. I don't need to go out to take pleasure or joy or comfort. You miss out on the things. And so the defining moment there in that simple example is the choice, the action, the Kriya Yoga to go to the thing and create that new cycle which reinforces, actually, I did enjoy going to that thing. I was present in those interactions, and then I got the benefits from it.
Exactly. And I can do it.
Yes, I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a really good example. And if you take that one step further, you know, it leads us to this idea that, yes, everything is connected, mind and body. And then if we find ourselves in that kind of cycle, the spiraling towards a place where we then are looking elsewhere for our comfort and for our feeling better, then can take us somewhere where we get really stuck. And I think in modern medicine, and it is improving, we've touched on this many times, and I'm sure we'll be having some podcasts later with people who are more enlightened, but, you know, it's a very poor hypothesis to work with people on this presupposition that there's no link between the mind and the body. And that has been for many, many years one of the difficult things. And I think that's one of the great things about yoga therapy and the way that we can be that sort of buffer and that support, that we're, through using things like the breath and awareness and mindfulness and all of that, we're kind of bridging that gap and helping people to start to take responsibility for all of that. And that then sort of leads me to think about the other framework which kind of links into this, which is these three qualities of mind. So I'm going to use some more Sanskrit words, but we'll sattva, rajas and tamas. And I think the like you were saying earlier, what a great lens it is to help people to understand where they are on that, you know, because the different kinds of cycles of mental and physical behaviour you have will often be a result of how much the pendulum is swinging in whatever direction through those three lenses. So you've got tamas, which is basically inertia. It's like confusion. It's heaviness. It's when you feel in that state where things feel really dark and you just don't have any energy. It's often described as a sort of storage state where you hold on to things, but it's not moving. There's no movement in it. And described as stagnant water. If you leave water in a bucket, or like we have all the time here, because it's raining all the time, and it just goes green and thick, and you can't see to the bottom, and it's no good for anything. And then the other end of the spectrum is rajas, which is this state of hyperactivity where there is a lot of movement, often too much movement, but it actually has that positive effect of driving the movement. So potentially the tamas is what might prevent you from going out and doing the social thing, because you feel really heavy and you feel in that, more in that direction. But the rajas is what gives you the motivation to get up and do something and be active. And again, rajas they're all really important, these states, because we need all of them to be a balanced human. But if we've got too much rajas, it's described as a rushing river, like when a river bursts its banks and it literally just pulls everything with it in its wake, and there's no time to stop and consider. We're just we become mindless when we're in that rajasic state, and that, I think, is very common, isn't it, right now, especially when we're looking at burnout and all of that. People are pushing towards that. And then sattva, which is this more balanced state. It's what we'd like to go towards as often as we can. So it's a clear, able to see things as they are, having a kind of a sense of, clear view of everything. There's nothing getting in the way, and there's a calmness and there's a steadiness behind it, and you feel grounded and just the right amount of everything. And that's described as a clear mountain brook. So when you get to the top of a mountain and the water that comes from the glacier is so clear that you can see right to the bottom and you can see exactly what is there in the water. And I think those three little images are really helpful. It's like, am I feeling like a raging river? Am I pulling everything along with me? Do I feel overwhelmed? Or do I just feel like a big blob, just like not able to pull myself out of that inertia? Or can I do little actions that can lead me more in the direction towards that clear mountain stream? And it's just quite a nice, simple way, isn't it? And of course, within it has lots of nuances. It's not just one or the other. They all interact with each other. And it is more complex than just that. But I think when we're working with clients, it's and just in the general yoga setting, it can be a really helpful way to give people a sense of, oh, okay, yes, I am feeling like that. What would be a good thing for me to do to ground myself? Or how could I motivate myself and feel a little bit more energy, get a bit more rajas, boost up the rajas a bit to get me moving? Apart from having a cup of coffee.
Yeah, definitely. I think what's great about the gunas is that it reminds us that there's not like one size that fits all in terms of change. So when things are marketed on Instagram and Facebook with this idea of New Year's resolution, it's like, well, hang on a second, we don't actually know what state that person's in. And in order for change to come, it needs this conscious effort.
Yeah.
But what effort is needed in order to bring about that? If somebody is very rajasic and they're living a lifestyle that's, like you said, very busy, constantly on the go, and that's exacerbating symptoms of their health conditions, with that type of person, like you said, you'd look at grounding them and bringing them back down. Whereas with somebody who's very tamasic and very heavy, and they're wanting to create change in their life, they're not going to be able, through sheer willpower alone, to suddenly start going to the gym 3 times a week and that being a sustainable cycle. And I think every person listening to this podcast will resonate with that thing of, we all know that when you start something new, if you put too much effort into something and you go kind of guns blazing into a new routine of doing the gym 3 times a week. On week 1, you might be able to do it 3 times. Week 2, you might be there 3 times. But by week 3, you're struggling because it's taken too much from you, along with the rest of your life, the context of your life that your body and mind are living. And then sometimes people can experience what we often describe, I mean, certainly as an OT, I would describe it as the boom and the bust. Like, you get the boom of the energy when a change is coming along, you want to form a new habit, you give it everything you've got, and then before you know it, you're in that bust because you've gone out of balance. Maybe you've gone from tamas, as we would say, to rajas, or you're trying to go from rajas into that settling, grounded. And it's what we've talked about in the previous episode. I mean, really what we need to do with change and habit is to meet yourself where you are, develop some awareness of where exactly that is, and then decide what the appropriate, sustainable change is in a way that takes usually way more time than what's being sold to you. So, you know, habits take time to form. It takes 21 days just for our mind to just kind of get used to something. 6 weeks before we're starting to feel that. And then the sustainability beyond that is even longer, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, that's one of the main issues, I think, with trying to create change is that, like we were talking about before, everybody wants everything and they want it now. And if they don't get it now, then they just go, oh, well, I'll try something else then. That's not working for me immediately. And it brings us to another really important aspect of habit and change and help and work, just generally working with clients with yoga therapy. And that is compliance. And that is also to do with commitment and creating something that is going to be something they can fit into their life, like you just said, you know, into that's the fabric of their day, looking at the long story rather than just like, so, in 6 months you'll be blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, no, it's taken this long to get where you are. It's going to take just as long to get somewhere else. But to help people to have that commitment to say, oh, actually, I was able to fit this small little thing in and it made me feel better. And so I'll do it again. And then it has that cumulative effect. And then they are very much more motivated to come back and to say, oh, actually, yeah, it's not that difficult. Because we don't generally as a culture really think about that idea of changing the neural pathway, but doing it in a way that is sustainable. And so I agree that one of the issues is the way things are being sold to people. And of course it comes back to that old chestnut, making money.
Yeah.
It doesn't make money, you know, and actually when you're working with, you know, as a yoga therapist or a yoga teacher, your goal is actually to give your clients and your students tools that make them responsible for their own health, and that they can actually take them away. And if they don't see you for a couple of weeks, or if they don't come to class, you can say, well, you have that. That's a tool that you will always have and you can always use, and you don't have to, you know, you don't have to come to me to get the magic. It's something that you are doing, and getting people to think about changing direction in a way that feels sustainable.
Yeah, and when you said to us on the course, it's something that I share often, it's that idea of this cycle that we're stuck in of these emotions, thoughts and behaviours being like you're stood on the top of virgin snow, and then you go down the slope and then you come back at the bottom and you come to the top of the hill, and then you repeat the same grooves again and again and again. And to take a small action is to just move your skis slightly in one direction. Then you're going to go down the slope in a different way. And that idea of just turning your skis, I think, is really helpful, because it's about this, how can we build in practices into our day that's going to lend itself to you feeling more centered and grounded, the sattva quality, which allows for a clarity of mind, which allows you then to begin to have awareness of your thoughts, processing of your emotions, and then therefore how those two things lend themselves to that thing that you normally do that maybe you don't want to do. But without the awareness of you seeing yourself doing that thing, thinking or knowing that your behaviours are being driven by the way that you're feeling in terms of emotions, you can't change your skis. You've got to have the skills that goes along with that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, again, it's a bit of a paradigm shift that is starting to, like there's books like Atomic Habits and all these little things that are starting to appear, and people are beginning to bring that into therapy and, working with people. But I think it's just not enough of a societal thing. It's that mindful attention to small detail and doing things carefully. That's one of the things I love about a lot of the sort of Japanese things, like the tea ceremonies and all those really beautiful, mindful things, the way people do things, because I'm not naturally mindful. I'm very slapdash and very in a hurry and always wanting to get to the next thing. That's my rajasic tendency. But over the years of working with these practices, I can really appreciate how taking your time is that's a perfect example of something which really can help you to address anxiety. Is that if you are someone who's got that, I want it all now, I want to do everything, and then you actually say, okay, you can't, so let's just take our time and let's just do one thing at a time. And that when you do that one thing at a time, suddenly everything else feels a little bit easier, and it's not a difficult thing to do. Or like I'm actually peeling some carrots to put in a soup now, rather than having speaking to the phone, doing something else. It's like one thing, and that again, that's a really actionable tool, isn't it? It's something that everybody could do, and obviously the proof of the pudding is, well, when you've done it and then you notice that you feel better, and then you can do it again, and then you find that you're starting to manage all your plates that you've been juggling, rather than feeling like, oh, hang on a minute, I think something's going to crash soon. You actually take a step back. So yeah, I mean, thinking about that and thinking about, the kind of people that we see, it can feel really scary for people, when they're like, oh, I don't know, you're asking me to do this and I've got all this going on. So it's like, well, like we said before, meet them where they are. What can they do,
Yeah, and I think that one of the main things, the turning of the skis that I recommend usually is if this is appropriate, it's taking 5 minutes to do a gentle, nourishing breath work or a meditation strategy. Just 5 minutes, 4 times a day is going to turn your skis towards that place of sattva, whether you're feeling rajasic or whether you feel tamasic, so up or down. It's just, can we fit that in? And the amount of times people have said to me, I do not have time, Sophie. And, I really want to honour the fact that everyone has unique life circumstances. I was thinking earlier about, I don't think I've ever had a client who's like a mum with kids. These clients don't get to me because they're so busy with their children and doing all of the things that people do, the domesticity and stuff. But so, I just want to be clear in saying, I'm not saying that everybody has the same day, but it's about, can you find moments? Can you find 5 minutes? And, one of my clients was like, I don't have any time once I step through that front door.
I know.
So the practice with her was, well, do you have time in your car? What if the traffic was 5 minutes later? And kind of a light bulb went off in her mind. And so she started initially when she got to work in the morning, she took her 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And then when she got home from work and she hadn't walked in the house, she took her 5 minutes in the car.
Yeah.
I'll often do we'll do a car practice because it's they're in the car anyway, and it's how do you find 5 minutes for you to come home to yourself, for you to cultivate that sense of sattva in a breathwork or a meditation, or like you said, in a mindful flow, because it's not appropriate for everyone to do breathwork and meditation when you first meet them.
No.
Sometimes it's about working with their mind is so either in the future or in the past. What can we do in the moment to center the mind on a mindful flow activity, like paint by numbers, or, you know, doing something that just involves them? A bit like when I practice shooting hoops, that's a mindful flow for me. Yeah. So with your context, you have to do with this information that's really appropriate and relevant and kind to yourself. If you are the parent who's got lots of children, it's about how do you find the minutes within your day, and nobody can tell you that. You've got to be able to reflect and think, well, actually, when I get in bed and I struggle to sleep because my mind is very rajasic and it's going over and over and over, either the past or the future, could it be then that I take my 10 minutes to do a meditation that's going to allow me to come into that more centered place, so that then I get the quality of sleep that I need in order to get up and do the duties that you have as a parent and an employee and a daughter and etc., all this other stuff. Yeah. You know what I mean by that, don't you?
Totally. So I think like the next episode we're going to look at, like, just based on this section of habit and change, and there's so much more of it, but just this area is like, what are the practical things we can do, and just looking at different strategies that everybody can use, whether or not they're doing, like you said, meditation or formal practices, whether they're just beginning to bring some of these ideas into their day, wherever, as you say, wherever they can take it, and everyone can do this. And that's what's so brilliant about it. It is like the how-to manual that we didn't get when we were born. That's what yoga is, actually. And yogis knew it thousands of years ago, and now neuroscience has confirmed it.
It sure has. And I think what I personally love about how yoga approaches habit and change is that, you know, unlike some of the stuff that we do see online and in studios, it's actually very kind and it's incredibly compassionate. And that's the way that we deliver it as yoga therapists is, you know, I know that there's another school of thought. I often speak to my older brother about this, you know, this idea of if you are harsh on yourself, that's what's going to drive and what's going to push you. This is my experience, one for myself personally and professionally. I have found if you approach everything with kindness, compassion and understanding, you are more likely to get the results of change rather than if you're driving it on those feelings of fear and feelings of failure, which are those Vritti Samskara cycles, which are probably latent, as we know, from childhood, from our caregivers, from people we've come across, like at teachers at school. I have found if you can change that into something that's way more supportive, loving and nourishing towards the self, that is a better journey and that is a path towards change that is more sustainable than the competition, the fear, the negativity that people are trying to use that energy to drive. What do you think about that?
I totally agree. And so in the next episode, let's see what kind and supportive things we can do for ourselves so that we are going to have the will to carry on to do that stuff rather than go, oh no, this isn't for me.
I failed.
Yeah. So if anybody is struggling with making a change, get in touch, you know, ask us the questions so that we can give you the answers that we know work, maybe finding a way that's going to be more sustainable for you.
Excellent. Okay, so tune in to the next episode where we are going to look at practical and supportive tools to support habit and change.
Thank you, Sophie.
Inside Out, a yoga therapy podcast, is hosted by Jane Cragg and Sophie Coggins. To leave comments, ask questions and interact with the show, follow Yoga Therapy Podcast on Instagram. Please also subscribe, rate and leave comments wherever you listen to help the show reach more people. This podcast is recorded at QPod Studios in Oldham and produced by me, Matt Dean, with video production from Eddie Corteen for QPod Productions. For more information, visit kupod.co.uk.